G'day guys and gal. Warhammer is old, and some stories don't age that well, especially bad ones, hence Games Workshop has made the tactical decision to either pretend some of that old lore doesn't exist, or just completely rewrite it. Imagine you're a descendant of a Nazi. If people ask you about your great-grandpa, you'll probably just say he was a German soldier who definitely wasn't a fascist, when in reality he was a horrible guy. Same philosophy, change the past to make the present less embarrassing. Now, Games Workshop haven't really put out a guide as to what has been retconned and what is canon. This created a culture of people having differing opinions on canon, hence many a neckbeard argument was had about whether or not it was still canon that you could hear Vulcan's massive dick slap against his thigh with every step, or if he actually wore reinforced underwear. To rectify this, Games Workshop has basically stated everything is canon, but not everything is true, as like a cheap but effective way to get people to relax about the lore and just enjoy it for what it was. However, whilst many of these retcons, as they are called, are necessary, some are a bit of a shame. Maybe that old lore opened up a lot of doorways that are now closed. Maybe it was an interesting concept, or maybe it was amazing but had to be removed due to corporate greed and copyright. Either way, today we'll cover the top 5 most interesting, cool bits of lore that have been retconned or removed entirely. We'll also discuss what the modern day 40k setting would look like if some of this lore was still canon. Before we get started, we are literally on 99,000 subscribers, which is just like the biggest tease ever. Like, goddamn, give me that silver play button that I might actually not even be eligible for, but I really hope I am. That's honestly the only thing keeping me going right now. With my state going into total lockdown due to a second wave, it's kinda cockblocked a few cool ideas I had for my 100k video. So instead, I'll be doing a Space Hulk Deathwing stream with Voldemort's Guide to Warhammer, Chapter Master Valrak, as well as Rogel Dawn from Text to Speech, aka Super Anchors. Stream will be Sunday evening during my usual stream time, which is 6 AM Australian time, 9 PM London time, or 4 PM Washington DC time. Join us for a solid purging session. Also, yeah, if you could love tap that subscribe button so we actually make it to 100k by Sunday. Otherwise, I'll look like a retard. I look like one anyway, but you know what I mean. Let's get into it. Starting us with number 5, we have the various times the Emperor and the Primarch's power and appearance have been retconned. The 12 to 14 tall Primarchs of modern day are absolutely gigantic compared to back in the Rogue Trader days. In fact, everyone was a lot smaller and less powerful. Space Marines just looked like roided up bodybuilders. Primarchs were big, but it was said that the Lion could pass for a normal human, whilst the Emperor was a normal man with cool psychic powers, not the AAA Alpha Plus Chungus Psychogod he is today. Horus was also just considered a normal asshole commander. It was only later that Games Workshop fed their riders speed and told them to go ham did the Super Soldier Demigod range roll out. It's not hard to see why they went down this path. By making their soldiers and characters more hardy, they could inflict more temporary damage on them in lore for badass purposes. Fulgrim surviving a headshot with a sniper, Vulcan surviving a nuke, Guilliman surviving having his face torn off, Lorgar surviving disembowelment, Conrad surviving getting stabbed through the spine. After all these incidents, the Primarchs were able to fully recover in a short amount of time. If they were just special humans, then it would have been way less fathomable for them to walk away from fatal injuries. On top of that, with the power level of the galaxy rising as a result of lots of scary enemies, the Imperium needed to be scaled up to match, so I can definitely see why they did this, and I approve of the change. With number 4, we have the various retcons and old lore of Xeno races. The Rogue Trader days were iconic, where the lore was silly and arcadey, and so were the Xenos. The Hadur, currently very grimdark scary boys, used to be Space Skaven, whilst the Tyranids used to use diplomats called Zotes. Space Dwarves, the Squats, were also a thing. Now, as Games Workshop started taking themselves probably a bit too seriously, they had begun to ditch a lot of this old school swagger. A perfect example being the makeover of the Noise Marines, from sex, drugs and rock and roll to meth, screeching and self-harm. The Tyranids took over from the position that the old Terminator Necrons had to become one-dimensional bad guys, hence having giant lizard diplomats wasn't really a part of their vibe anymore. I mean, I don't think a giant lizard diplomat would be anyone's vibe, but hey, I don't judge. I think Games Workshop got a little bit picky and overly serious though, as they basically removed the Squats, Zotes, and Skaven and others from the lore and pretended they never existed, creating this grimdark paradise that a lot of wackos keep jerking off to as if it's the golden era of Warhammer. Fortunately, it seems like the big GW have gotten their sense of humour back, as Zotes and Squats were added back into canon with recent models and lore teasers. No news on Space Skaven, but to me the Skaven are like Amber Heard, sneaky, manipulative, lying pieces of shit that deserve a bullet to the head. So I'm not too worried about that. I see why Games Workshop retconned those Xenos out of the setting originally, even if I didn't agree with it. They were crafting a very specific narrative that tied into a very specific theme, and they basically needed to shape the setting to fit into that. Fortunately, the power of nostalgia and memes is a hell of a thing not even the overlords themselves can ignore, so thankfully these Xenos have been retconned back into existence. Down to number 3, did you know that used to be a 5th major Chaos God who was actually the most interesting and had the most potential out of all of them? No, it wasn't Matt Ward, it was Malal, the Chaos God of hating chaos. A theme I've always wanted Games Workshop to explore was chaos-aligned entities who weren't inherently evil, champions of their gods who embodied them but didn't have to shit in everyone's breakfast. For Warhammer Fantasy, this could have been a Norse tribe who rejected the calls of the Dark Gods. Every time it seems like Games Workshop is going to produce a bad guy with a strong moral code, they just rip them away. Khan was an absolute bro to a point where people rooted for him. Now he's a generic OP berserker. Conrad Curse always sought after justice in his own morbid way, but by the end of his life he killed innocent people for the fun of it. Having a Chaos God whose goal was to destroy the other Chaos Gods would make for a lot of the enemy of my enemy is my friend situations, as the servants of Malal might have to make a desperate team up with the Imperium to beat a greater Chaos threat. Yes, Games Workshop kept Malal in as Malice due to a copyright infringement, and the Renegade chapter, the Sons of Malice, are still considered canon. However, it's a massive downgrade to what we had. We had the 5th Chaos God who was actively trying to materialize in real space and could have thrown a real spanner in the works. Now it's just a minor warp entity that has one barely mentioned chapter serving it, and that's if they're still alive. They got thrown into the enemy of everyone basket and are all slowly dying as a result of Malice eating their souls. Not exactly prime criteria for good anti-heroes. Warhammer Fantasy did it well. Malal had a champion who was obviously chaosy but he teamed up with the forces of order against chaos out of necessity. That's the kind of stuff I like to see. As I said before, the main force behind doing my boy Malal dirty like this was a copyright issue about the owners of Malal, and by the time that was sorted and Malice was established, Games Workshop couldn't be stuffed rocking the boat too much and throwing another Chaos God in there. Hopefully this isn't the end of Malal. They have left the door open for him, so I'm keen to see where it goes. Number 2 gives us the Illuminati and the biological children of the Emperor called the Sensei, who were both retconned out of existence. Basically, the Emperor was a horny man who ploughed a serious number of puss. As he was a man, he had man jizz, which could impregnate women. I assumed he would have done this frequently, as he was a muscle-bound, tanned, sexy man who could mind control people. His sperm is also Emperor sperm, so his fertility would have been super high. Basically, as a result of his literal cheek-clapping crusades, he fathered thousands of immortal children who all have superpowers. They get more powerful as they reunite. They are also all psychic blanks, so the Biggie had no idea they even existed, which is probably good for him. The amount he would have to play in child support would have absolutely ruined him. It's like the joke that if Jesus came back in modern times, he would get hated on by mainstream Christians because he isn't really a fan of fanatically religious capitalism. Same here goes for these senseis. These sons of the Imperium's god were relentlessly hunted down and exterminated by the Inquisition, as they were too level-headed and reasonable. To make matters more interesting, the Illuminati existed and were basically hyper-pure members of the Imperium who were able to dispel a demon from their bodies, hence became totally immune to chaos. They were trying to track down all the sensei and prepare them for when the Emperor finally died, which would cause his spirit to devour his sons to create a new Emperor, when merged with the Star Child. If this sounds confusing, then that is because it fucking is. It's very confusing, which is why it was retconned. Whilst the Star Child might still be kind of a thing, the Sensei were retconned into the various perpetuals that have helped or hindered the Emperor in some way. Whilst the Illuminati's demon rejecting vibe, which was dope, was given to a Space Marine chapter called the Exorcists, who basically let demons rape their initiates and then exorcise them. Because, as the saying goes, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, or leaves you physically or mentally disabled, but that doesn't really roll off the tongue. I don't mind the concept of a sensei, however the whole Illuminati plot, as well as the fact that the senseis were like those kids from the I Am Number 4 franchise, doesn't really fit into Warhammer that well. It was just a bit too silly and had too much impact on the plot. But as we said, who knows, the Sensei could make some kind of return in the future, and I'm still holding on to the fact that the Star Child is lurking out there somewhere, maybe in the form of a cranky, wheelchair-bound Inquisitor. And finally, the number one coolest and most interesting piece of lore that was retconned is an Eldar human hybrid who was the librarian of the Ultramarines. As you can tell, in the early days of Games Workshop they had a lot of fun and did a lot of experimenting. Hence, Ilian Nanastast fucking whatever it is, was born to a human mum and an Eldar dad. After proving to be a psyker, he eventually worked his way up to the top where he became an Ultramarine astropath librarian, likely due to the Ultramarines' love of big titty Eldar girlfriends, as shown by their daddy. Rub me off Gull, my man. Since the existence of Ilian, it has been revealed that despite maybe sharing a genetic ancestor, Eldar DNA is way different to humans, as well as likely having different chromosome counts. As we know, if you mess with chromosomes, you are a big risk of having the downs, so if a baby was to be produced between an Eldar and a human, it would probably be super retarded and mutated as. On top of this, Games Workshop has made it since clear that the Imperium is very xenophobic and would see a hybrid as an abomination. Definitely not someone who would take a leading role in a first founding Space Marine chapter, or any chapter for that matter. So sadly, Old Mate doesn't exist and never did. The reason why this is the most interesting retcon to me personally is because of the implications it had. If this was forced to remain canon, then it would completely change the Imperium's dynamic. They would be non-xenophobic, hence strong and steady alliances between the Imperium, Tau, Eldar and other Xenos would likely be established. Chaos, Orcs and Tyranids would get their asses collectively whooped by this unified front. It's already been shown that when Tyranids go up against more than one race at a time, they get completely raped, as they cannot adapt to such a variety of weapons and strategies fast enough. While I agree with and understand Ilian not existing anymore, I would be a fan of potential hybrids that weren't Gene Stealers. Gene Stealers creep me out, but some Eldar human hybrids who are like Nephilim would be really cool. Maybe they have some kind of hidden gene in them put there by the old ones as an experiment that unlocks for some of the hybrids, giving them a unique presence. I can't say for sure, all I can say is that if I was in the 40k universe, I would pretty much spend all my time and effort into playing some big titty Eldar girlfriends. And no, I would not use protection. As a wise, AIDS-ridden father once said, it doesn't count if you use a condom. I really enjoy the lore and style of Warhammer 40k as it is these days, and while some retcons are a shame, all of them have purpose and are done for the right reasons. Games Workshop has also showed a willingness to leave the door open to old bits of lore to really hit us in the nostalgia. And that does us for today guys, the top 5 coolest or most interesting moments in lore that were retconned. If you have a lore moment that you don't think is canon anymore but you really enjoy it, then put it in the comments below. Remember guys, the 100k sub stream with the boys will be on Sunday evenings, so get down and let's celebrate my ego being inflated by a number on the internet. If you enjoyed this video and want to support the channel, then Patreon is the place to be. Only $1 gives you access to a boatload of Warhammer Hentai, whilst $10 gives you access to the Major Kill Warhammer Hentai calendar. Hit the subscribe button, then hit the real subscribe button for more retcon content. Join the Discord for more memes, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.